The frantic knocking on my apartment door came at midnight. Not the polite kind, the desperate kind. Rapid, uneven thuds that made my heart jump before I even reached the handle. I pulled the door open and froze. My identical twin sister Mara stood in the hallway, trembling like a leaf in a storm. Her lip was split and bleeding. One eye was swollen almost completely shut. But before I tell you how it started, I need to ask you a favor. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and comment where you are watching from. Your support is critical, and it could save lives. Her right cheek showed the beginning of a dark bruise. She was missing a shoe. Her hair hung in tangled strands around her face. Before I could even process what I was seeing, she whispered in a voice so small I almost didn't hear it. "Don't tell him I'm here." Her phone vibrated in her shaking hand. The screen lit up with a name I'd learned to hate, Calvin. Then a text message appeared. "Get home, now." My stomach dropped like a stone. My name is Lee Turner. And what happened next wasn't driven by rage or impulse. It was driven by strategy. By years of watching my sister suffer while everyone around us pretended everything was fine. I pulled Mara inside quickly and locked the door behind her. She collapsed onto my couch, her whole body shaking uncontrollably. I grabbed a blanket and wrapped it around her shoulders. She tried to speak but could barely get the words out. He didn't mean to. He was just angry because I forgot to pick up his dry cleaning, and then I said something stupid and I cut her off. "Mara, stop. Don't defend him." The words came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. She flinched and started crying harder. I sat beside her and pulled her close. Through her sobs, she finally said the words that broke my heart. "This wasn't the first time, Lee. It's been happening for months." My chest tightened. I'd suspected something was wrong. I'd seen the signs. The way she'd cancel plans at the last minute. The long sleeves in summer. The nervous way she checked her phone constantly. But hearing her confirm it out loud made everything real in the worst possible way. My mind flashed back to 3 years earlier. Mara had just started dating Calvin Pierce. She brought him to a family barbecue, and I watched our parents fall in love with him instantly. He had that clean-cut look, polite smile, firm handshake. He helped Mom set up tables. He complimented Dad's grilling. He laughed at all the right jokes. "Finally," Mom said to me in the kitchen, watching them through the window, "a man who can handle sweet Mara." I hated that word, handle. Like my sister was some delicate object that needed managing, but I kept quiet. Calvin seemed nice enough at first, charming, attentive. He brought Mara flowers. He opened doors. He said all the right things. Our whole family thought he was perfect. But I noticed something that day, something small that made my stomach twist. When Mara accidentally knocked over a glass of lemonade, Calvin's expression changed for just a second. A flash of something cold and angry before the smile returned. Later that same afternoon, I was carrying plates to the kitchen when I heard Calvin's voice, low and harsh. "Can't you do anything right?" I froze. Through the screen door, I could see him standing close to Mara near the garage. She looked down at her feet, mumbling an apology. When he noticed me watching, his entire demeanor shifted instantly. He laughed loudly and put his arm around her shoulders. "Just teasing, babe. You know I love you." But I'd seen his face before he knew I was there. I'd heard his tone. That night I pulled Mom aside and mentioned what I'd witnessed. She waved it off immediately. "Oh, Lee, Mara can be so sensitive sometimes. Calvin's probably just stressed with his new job. Don't read too much into it." I tried to push back, but Mom changed the subject. It was the first time I realized my family had a blind spot when it came to Calvin. A dangerous one. Over the next year, that blind spot only grew wider. Mara became quieter, more withdrawn. She stopped sharing things with me like she used to. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd smile and say everything was fine. But I could see it in her eyes. Something was wrong. Our parents, though, kept praising Calvin. "Such a good provider. So responsible. Treats her like a queen." They saw what they wanted to see. And I realized something about my family's dynamics that I'd never quite articulated before. They'd always seen Mara as the fragile one, the one who needed protecting and guidance. And they saw me as the responsible twin, the strong one, the fixer. It had been that way since we were kids. Mara got sympathy. I got expectations. So when Calvin came along, they were relieved someone else could take care of her. They never questioned whether she actually needed to be taken care of at all. They just handed her over. About 6 months before Mara showed up at my door, Calvin cornered me at a family dinner. We were alone in the hallway while everyone else was in the dining room. He stepped close, invading my space deliberately. His voice was pleasant, but his eyes were ice cold. You know, Lee, it would be better for everyone if you didn't interfere in our marriage. I held his gaze. I'm not interfering, I'm being a sister. He smiled, but there was nothing warm about it. Mara gets confused sometimes. She exaggerates, makes things sound worse than they are. I wouldn't want you believing stories that aren't true. It was a warning, clear as day. After he walked away, I found Mara in the bathroom. I told her what Calvin had said. Her reaction shocked me. She apologized to me. I'm sorry he bothered you. I must have said something that made him think. Please don't be mad at him, Lee. He's just protective. That was the moment I truly understood how deeply he'd gotten into her head. Back in my apartment, Mara stared at her reflection in my bathroom mirror. The bruises looked even worse under the bright lights. She touched her swollen eye gently and started crying again. I don't know how to leave, Lee. I don't have anywhere to go. He controls all the money. He knows where I am all the time. He checks my phone, my emails, everything. Her voice cracked. If I try to leave, he'll find me and it'll be worse. I stood behind her, looking at both our faces in the mirror. Identical. Same dark hair, same green eyes, same height and build. We'd spent our childhood switching places as a game, fooling teachers, confusing friends. It had always been fun, harmless. But looking at her broken reflection next to mine, an idea formed in my mind. A dangerous one, a necessary one. I met her eyes in the mirror. Mara, do you trust me? She nodded without hesitation. That trust was about to change everything. I explained my plan carefully. We would switch places. I would go back to her house pretending to be her. I would gather evidence of Calvin's abuse, document everything, build a legal case that he couldn't fight. Meanwhile, she would stay hidden here, safe where he couldn't reach her. Her eyes went wide. You'd really do that? Lee, it's too dangerous if he figures out. I squeezed her hand. He won't. We've fooled everyone our entire lives. He'll never suspect. She looked terrified, but also hopeful for the first time since she'd arrived. What if he hurts you? I thought about that for a moment. He won't have the chance. I'm not you, Mara. I'm not afraid of him, and I know exactly how to use that. Before she could respond, her phone rang. Calvin's name flashed on the screen. We both stared at it. I picked it up and answered. My voice perfectly mimicked hers. Soft, apologetic, scared. I'm coming home now. I'm sorry. I hung up before he could respond. Mara gave me her clothes. A simple blue dress she'd been wearing under her jacket. Her house keys. Her wedding ring, which I slipped onto my finger. It felt wrong, heavy, like wearing a shackle. She helped me braid my hair the way she usually wore hers. We stood side by side in front of the mirror. Identical again, just like when we were kids, switching places to fool our teachers or sneak extra dessert. But this wasn't a game anymore. This was survival. Mara's hands shook as she adjusted my collar. Be careful, she whispered. I hugged her tight. Lock the door behind me. Don't answer if anyone knocks unless it's me. I'll text you every hour so you know I'm okay. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I grabbed her purse and her phone, took a deep breath, and walked out the door into the cold night air, heading toward a house I'd only visited a handful of times, heading toward a man who had no idea what was coming. I used Mara's keys to unlock the front door of their house. It was a nice place, neat, clean, the kind of home that looked perfect from the outside. Calvin was packing in the living room when I entered. His jaw was clenched. His hands were balled into fists, but the moment he saw me, his expression shifted. The anger softened into something that looked almost like relief. Good, you're finally listening. His voice was calm now, controlled, like he'd flipped a switch. I kept my eyes down, mimicking Mara's body language, shoulders slightly hunched. Hands clasped in front of me, he walked closer. Where did you go? I made my voice small and shaky. I just needed air, I'm sorry. He studied my face for a long moment. I held my breath, terrified he'd somehow see through me. But he didn't. He saw exactly what he expected to see. His wife, submissive, apologetic, broken. He sighed heavily, like I was a child who'd misbehaved. You can't just run off like that, Mara. You scared me. I thought something happened to you. Calvin gestured to the couch. Sit down, we need to talk. I sat, keeping my posture exactly as I'd seen Mara do countless times, small, non-threatening. He stood over me, and I realized this was his favorite position, looking down, in control. I need you to understand something, he said. His tone was steady, almost gentle, but there was steel underneath. When you act out like tonight, it reflects badly on both of us. People talk, they judge. I work hard to maintain our reputation, and I need you to respect that. I nodded slowly, saying nothing. He continued. I know you get emotional sometimes, that's just who you are, but you need to think before you act, do you understand? I forced myself to whisper, yes. He seemed satisfied with that. Good, now apologize. I looked up at him, confused. For what? His eyes narrowed. For running off, for making me worry, for being dramatic. Each word was deliberate. This was a script he'd performed many times before. I kept my voice steady and small. I'm tired, Calvin, can we talk about this tomorrow? He stared at me for a moment, and I worried I'd pushed too far, but then he shrugged. Fine, go to bed, but we're not done discussing this. I stood and walked toward the bedroom, feeling his eyes on my back the entire way. Once inside, I closed the door and let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage. This was how he talked to her, like she was a child. Like she was stupid, like she existed only to serve his image. I pulled out Mara's phone and texted her from my number. I'm okay. He believes it's you. Going to start looking for evidence tomorrow. Her response came immediately. Please be careful. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room. Everything was neat, organized, controlled, just like Calvin. And that's when I realized his biggest weakness, his ego, his reputation. He cared more about how things looked than anything else. And that was exactly what I'd used to destroy him. The next morning, Calvin left early for work. He barely said goodbye, just grabbed his coffee and walked out the door like I was furniture. The moment his car pulled away, I started searching. I went to his home office first. It was locked, but I found the key hidden in a drawer in the kitchen. Typical. Inside, his desk was immaculate, files organized by color, everything labeled. I turned on his computer and wasn't surprised to find it wasn't password protected. Why would it be? He never expected Mara to challenge him. I opened his email first. What I found made my blood run cold. Messages to coworkers where he called Mara unstable and emotionally fragile. Texts to friends making jokes about her. Screenshots of her therapy appointment reminders that he'd forwarded to his brother with laughing emojis. He'd been systematically destroying her credibility for months, building a narrative that if she ever spoke up, no one would believe her. It was calculated, cruel, and all time-stamped. I spent the next hour carefully screenshotting everything. Every email, every text, every cruel comment. I sent them all to my own email account in small batches so it wouldn't trigger any alerts. I was meticulous, organized. I documented dates, times, and recipients, built a timeline of his behavior. Then I found something else. A folder labeled insurance. Inside were photos. Photos of Mara with bruises that I'd never seen. Photos he'd taken without her knowledge, probably to use as leverage if she ever tried to leave. Evidence of his violence that he'd kept like trophies. My stomach turned. I downloaded everything. When I heard his car pull into the driveway unexpectedly, I shut down the computer, locked the office, and returned the key exactly where I'd found it. By the time he walked through the door, I was in the kitchen making lunch like nothing had happened. He kissed my forehead absently and grabbed a water from the fridge. I forgot a file, he muttered, heading to his office. My heart pounded, but everything was exactly as he'd left it. That evening, I suggested something I knew would make him uncomfortable. Calvin, I think we should try couples counseling. He looked up from his dinner, fork frozen halfway to his mouth. What? I kept my voice soft and uncertain the way Mara would. I just think it might help us communicate better. A therapist could. He cut me off with a laugh. We don't need therapy, Mara. We're fine. You just need to stop being so dramatic about every little thing. I pushed gently. But if a professional could help us. His hand slammed on the table, making me jump. I said no. I'm not going to sit in some room and have a stranger tell me how to run my marriage. The problem isn't us. The problem is that you are being overly sensitive. I looked down at my plate, hiding my satisfaction. Perfect. I pulled out Mara's phone and hit record under the table. Why won't you even consider it? I asked quietly. Because there's nothing wrong with me, he snapped. Maybe you should go to therapy alone. God knows you need it. I let the recording run for another minute before stopping it. Evidence collected. 2 days later, Calvin announced we were hosting a dinner party. His work friends and their wives. I need you to make a good impression, he told me that morning. Wear the blue dress, do your hair nicely, and please try not to say anything embarrassing. I nodded obediently. That evening, I played the role perfectly. I smiled. I served food. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny, but I also watched, and I listened. Calvin was performing too, the charming husband, the successful professional. Everyone loved him. They pitied me, though. I could see it in their eyes. Poor Mara, so quiet, so nervous, so lucky to have such a patient husband. During dessert, I asked a simple question to one of the wives. Do you ever feel like you're walking on eggshells at home, like you can't do anything right? The table went quiet. Calvin's smile tightened. The wife, Karen, laughed uncomfortably. Sometimes marriage is hard, she said carefully. I nodded. It's just hard when the eggshells turn into broken glass. You know, more uncomfortable silence. Calvin changed the subject quickly. After everyone left, one of Calvin's friends, Marcus, hung back. Calvin was in the kitchen cleaning up. Marcus pulled me aside in the hallway, his expression concerned. Mara, are you okay? That comment you made earlier. I looked at him carefully. Have you ever seen Calvin lose his temper? He shifted uncomfortably. I mean, yeah, we all get stressed sometimes. Men deal with a lot of pressure. I pushed further. Does stress usually leave bruises? His face went pale. Stared at me for a long moment. Has he hurt you? I didn't answer directly, just looked at him, let the silence speak. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, I don't want to get involved in marital issues, but if you need help. Calvin appeared in the doorway. Need help with what? His voice was pleasant, but his eyes were dangerous. Marcus stammered. Nothing, just offering to help clean up. Calvin smiled. We're good, thanks for coming. After Marcus left, Calvin turned to me slowly. What did you say to him? I kept my voice innocent. Nothing, he just asked if I was okay. Calvin's jaw clenched. You're embarrassing me, Mara. The next morning, while Calvin was at work, I left the house for the first time since the switch. I drove to a law office across town where no one would recognize me. I'd made an appointment under Mara's name. The lawyer, Patricia Reeves, was in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I sat across from her and explained everything. I showed her the screenshots, the recorded conversation, the photos Calvin had taken of Mara's injuries. She reviewed everything carefully, taking notes. This is comprehensive documentation, she said finally. You have messages proving verbal and emotional abuse, audio of him refusing counseling and admitting to controlling behavior, photos documenting physical violence. This is enough to file for separation with a protective order. I felt relief wash over me. What happens next? She explained the process. File paperwork, get a court date, serve him the papers. Where is Mara now? She asked. I hesitated. Somewhere safe. Where he can't find her. Patricia nodded. Good, keep her there, and be careful. Men like this don't react well when they lose control. I drove back to my apartment, not to the house I was supposed to call home. I needed to see Mara, to tell her everything. She opened the door, looking better than she had days ago. The swelling around her eye had gone down. She'd showered and changed into my clothes, but she still looked scared. I told her about the lawyer, about the evidence, about the plan. We file the papers next week, I explained. Patricia will handle everything. You'll get a protective order. The court will freeze joint accounts temporarily so he can't drain them. You'll be safe. Mara's eyes filled with tears. What if he comes after me, after you? I took her hands. He won't have the chance. Once the papers are served, he'll be too busy dealing with legal consequences, and I'll stay at the house until then, keeping him distracted. She shook her head. I can't let you do this. It's too dangerous. I squeezed her hands tighter. You're my sister, my twin. I'd do anything for you. And this ends now. I went back to Calvin's house that evening. He was already home, packing the living room with a glass of whiskey. The moment I walked in, he started. Where were you? His voice was sharp. I kept my tone calm. I went to the store. We needed milk. He moved closer, invading my space. You didn't tell me you were leaving. You know the rules, Mara. Rules, like I was a prisoner. I looked down, playing the part. I'm sorry, I didn't think. He cut me off. That's right, you didn't think. Never think. He took a drink, then started ranting. You know what your problem is? You don't appreciate what you have, this house, this life, me. You'd be nothing without me. No one would ever want you. You're lucky I put up with you. I kept my head down, but under my hair I was recording everything on Mara's phone. He continued, his voice getting louder. And you know what? No one would ever believe you if you tried to say I was the problem. Everyone knows you're unstable, emotional, dramatic. I've made sure of that. Calvin took another drink, his anger building. Sometimes I think about just leaving, finding someone who actually appreciates me, but then I remember how pathetic you'd be on your own. You need me more than I need you. Every word was venom. Every sentence was designed to break someone down, but I wasn't Mara. His words didn't touch me. They just gave me more ammunition. When he finally stopped ranting and went to bed, I stayed up late. I sent the new recording to Patricia. I organized all the evidence into a clean, chronological file. I prepared everything for what was coming next. 3 days later, Calvin announced we were taking a weekend trip. Just the two of us to reconnect. His smile was cold. It was a control move, a way to isolate Mara further. That sounds nice, I said, even as my skin crawled, but I had a different plan. The next morning, while Calvin was in the shower, I met Patricia outside. I gave her everything, every piece of evidence, every recording, every photo. File it today, I told her. She nodded. The papers will be served tomorrow morning. I went back inside before Calvin noticed I'd been gone. We had breakfast. He talked about work, about the trip, about his plans. He had no idea his entire world was about to collapse. The next morning, everything changed. Calvin was drinking his coffee, reading the news on his tablet when someone knocked on the door. Loud, official. He frowned and went to answer it. I stayed in the kitchen, listening. "Calvin Pierce?" a man's voice asked. "Yes, you've been served." I heard papers rustling. Then silence. Then Calvin's voice rose in confusion and anger. "What is this? Separation papers? A protective order request?" He stormed back into the kitchen, papers in hand, his face bright red. "Mara, what the hell is this?" He shoved the documents toward me. I looked at them calmly. Then I looked at him, and I smiled. "Those are divorce papers, Calvin, and a request for a restraining order based on documented abuse." His mouth fell open. "But you were here." I stood up slowly. "I was, but Mara wasn't." It took him a moment to understand. His eyes went from the papers to my face and back again. "Lee," his voice cracked. "You're this whole time," I nodded. "Surprise." His face went through several emotions at once. Shock, confusion, then rage, pure undiluted rage. "You can't do this. This is fraud. This is—" I cut him off. "This is justice. Every conversation you had with me thinking I was Mara, recorded. Every cruel word, every threat, every admission of abuse, all documented. All legal, because technically I was acting as Mara with her full consent, which means everything I gathered is admissible." He started toward me, but I held up my phone. "One more step and I'll call the police. The protective order goes into effect immediately. You come near Mara or me again, you go to jail." He stopped, his fists clenched. "Where is she?" I smiled coldly. "Somewhere you'll never find her, somewhere safe. Somewhere she can finally breathe without you controlling every moment of her life." I grabbed my purse and walked toward the door. "Oh, and Calvin, everyone knows now. Your friends, your family, your job, I made sure of it." I didn't wait for his response. I walked out of that house and never looked back. Over the next few weeks, Calvin's life fell apart exactly as it should have. The protective order was granted. Mara was awarded temporary custody of all marital assets. His employer received copies of the messages where he'd called his wife derogatory names and mocked her therapy appointments. HR opened an investigation. Several of his friends, including Marcus, quietly distanced themselves. His perfect reputation crumbled. And through it all, he tried to call, tried to text, tried to explain, threaten, and beg, but Mara never answered. I never answered. There was no dramatic confrontation, no screaming match, no showdown, just silence. The silence of consequences was finally catching up to a man who thought he'd never face them. The divorce proceeded smoothly. Mara got the house, got half of everything, got her freedom, and Calvin got exactly what he deserved. Nothing but the ruins of the life he'd built on cruelty. 6 months later, I sat with Mara in her new apartment. It was small but bright. She decorated it herself, chose her own furniture, her own colors. For the first time in years, she looked like herself again. The bruises were long gone. She'd started therapy, made new friends, found a job she actually enjoyed. We sat together on her new couch, sunlight streaming through the windows. She squeezed my hand. "You saved me, Lee." I shook my head. "No, you saved yourself. You dared to leave. To ask for help, to trust me. I just turned on the lights so you could see the way out." She smiled, tears in her eyes, happy tears this time. "I never thought I'd be free of him." I smiled back. "You were always strong enough to be free. You just needed someone to remind you of that." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, just being sisters, just being safe. In the end, the strongest revenge wasn't destroying Calvin. It was helping my sister rebuild a life he could never touch again. A life where she was free, where she was valued, where she was finally truly safe. And that was worth every risk I'd taken, every moment of fear, because family means fighting for each other, not just protecting, but empowering. And I'd do it all again in a heartbeat. And that is how betrayal turned into triumph. Thank you for riding through this storm with me. Before you go, subscribe, tap like, and comment where in the world you're watching from. I read every single one.